I was thinking recently about how many people probably sit at their kitchen table on Sunday evening, quietly convincing themselves that this time things are finally going to be different. The house is usually a little calmer by then, dinner is over, and maybe the dishwasher is running in the background. And for the first time all weekend, there's a small pocket of space to actually think for a minute. So you pull out a planner where you start mentally organizing the week ahead while you're putting laundry away, and before long, your mind starts drifting towards all the things you've been wanting to get back on track with. You think about how long it's been since you've gone walking consistently. You remember the half finished project sitting somewhere in the house that you genuinely wanted to work on. Maybe you start imagining what it would feel like to wake up and move through the week without constantly feeling behind on everything. And somewhere inside all of that, there's usually a moment where you start believing maybe you're finally getting your footing back again. I think that's why Sundays can feel strangely emotional for people sometimes. There's hope in them. Not dramatic hope exactly, more like the feeling that maybe life could feel a little easier if you could just get a few things under control again. And honestly, most people mean it when they make those promises to themselves. That's important to say because I think people are often much harder on themselves than they should be. A lot of people assume inconsistency means they must not want change badly enough. But when I really look at the women around me, and honestly, when I look at my own life too, that explanation just doesn't hold up. Most people are trying incredibly hard. They're trying to keep up with responsibilities, stay emotionally steady, take care of people they love, manage work, manage home life, manage finances and their health, and somehow still find enough energy left over to improve themselves on top of all of that. That's a tremendous amount for one nervous system to carry. And then Monday arrives. Sometimes the week starts smoothly enough, but other times you can already feel by breakfast that things are slightly off. Maybe you didn't sleep well the night before. Maybe your brain already feels crowded before the day has properly started. Maybe something stressful happened at work, or somebody needs something from you emotionally, or you realize halfway through the afternoon that your energy disappeared hours ago and you've been running on fumes without even noticing it. What's interesting is that most routines don't fall apart because of one huge dramatic event. Usually it's much quieter than that. Life just gradually starts pulling your attention in too many directions at once. By the middle of the week, the version of you who felt so hopeful on Sunday evening suddenly feels very far away. And that's usually the moment people start turning the frustration inward. That internal dialogue becomes brutal surprisingly fast. You start wondering why you can't seem to stay consistent. You compare yourself to people who appeared more disciplined. You begin thinking maybe you're just someone who struggles with follow through. But honestly, I think a lot of people are blaming themselves for something that has far more to do with structure than character. Motivation is helpful, but it's also incredibly unstable because it depends so heavily on emotional state, energy level, stress load, sleep quality, hormones, mental clarity, and whatever else life happens to be throwing at you that week. Human beings are not emotionally consistent creatures. Some mornings you wake up feeling focused and capable and ready to take on everything. Other mornings it feels like your brain is already tired before your feet even hit the floor. And I think many people are trying to build routines that only work on the first kind of day. That's part of the problem. The routines that survive long term are usually not the most ambitious ones. They're the ones that remain doable even when life feels heavy. I started noticing this in my own life in very ordinary ways. There have been so many times where I created elaborate plans for myself because they looked good on paper. Detailed schedules, perfect routines, systems that made me feel productive while I was building them. But eventually, I started realizing that the things that actually changed my behavior were rarely complicated. What made walking easier was not finding more motivation. It was seeing my shoes sitting by the door already waiting for me. What made writing easier wasn't forcing myself into some intense creative discipline. It was leaving a notebook open on the counter where I would naturally sit with my coffee in the morning. Those things sound almost too simple to matter, but they matter because the brain is constantly looking for what feels easiest to begin. Researchers sometimes explain this through implementation intention, which is really just the idea that behaviors become easier to repeat when they're connected to something already happening naturally in your life. And honestly, once you notice that, you start seeing it everywhere. You don't stand at the front door debating whether to lock it when you leave the house. You don't usually negotiate with yourself about brushing your teeth before bed. Those routines became automatic because repetition linked them to cues over time. The brain likes patterns that feel familiar. It relaxes into rhythms that no longer require constant decision making. And I think people underestimate how exhausting constant decision making actually is. There's so much invisible mental negotiation happening in the background of daily life all the time. Should I work on this now or later? Should I rest? Should I clean first? Should I start over Monday? Should I skip it today because I'm tired? That ongoing internal conversation drains enormous amounts of mental energy. Structure helps reduce some of that noise. Not rigid structure, not perfectionistic structure. I'm talking about gentle rhythms that quietly support your life instead of demanding flawless performance from you every day. Because honestly, I think a lot of women are building routines for fantasy versions of themselves instead of the exhausted, overloaded, very human version who actually has to live their real life every day. We imagine the version of us who wakes up energized every morning, meals prepped perfectly every Sunday, never stress eats, never gets emotionally overwhelmed, and follows through on everything exactly as planned. But real life rarely moves that cleanly. There are weeks where you can already feel the emotional weight of life before Monday is even halfway over. Your attention feels scattered, your energy is lower than normal, and even small responsibilities seem to take more effort than they should. During those kinds of seasons, the routines that tend to survive are rarely the impressive ones. They're usually the smaller, gentler rhythms that don't ask you to become a completely different person just to maintain them. And honestly, I think that's something a lot of people learn the hard way. There's a certain kind of discouragement that comes from repeatedly making huge promises to yourself and then watching those plans collapse under the weight of real life. After a while, it starts affecting the way you see yourself. You begin questioning your discipline, your consistency, sometimes even your ability to follow through on things at all. But what I've noticed is that people rebuild trust within themselves in much quieter ways than they expect. It happens when you still take the short walk, even though you don't feel particularly motivated that day. It happens when you return to a simple evening routine after a stressful week instead of deciding you've failed and given up completely. Little moments like that may not look dramatic from the outside, but internally, they start changing something important. You begin experiencing yourself differently. Instead of constantly feeling like someone who starts over, you slowly begin becoming someone who knows how to return. And honestly, I think that matters much more than perfection ever will, because most people are not actually searching for some flawlessly optimized life. They're looking for a way of living that feels steadier and more manageable. They want rhythms that support them during difficult seasons instead of routines that immediately collapse the moment life becomes stressful. Maybe that's the real goal, not becoming perfectly motivated all the time, but building patterns that are gentle enough to keep carrying you even during the weeks when life feels heavy. If you'd like more conversations like this, everything is linked below. Progress doesn't come from pressure, it comes from clarity.